What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So, before I get into this video, I want to give a shout out to one of my subscribers. It's belated, but I haven't forgotten. I want to give a shout out to one of my subscribers for contributing to the channel. Much respect to Aram for his $10 donation to the channel via the PayPal. Much respect to Aram, one of my most frequent contributors on this channel, a lover of old school talk, NBA talk, lover of old school, in regards to a lot of things, music and other stuff as well. So shout out to Aram for the donation. And shout out to anybody that has donated to my channel over the past couple of years. And if you want to donate to the channel, if you want to show love to Too Raw for TV, or to Too Raw for Sports for that matter, or to Too Raw for, oh no, Too Raw Classics. If you want to show love to any of those channels and politically incorrect, you could do so. The links in the description box below via the PayPal or the Cash App. And I also do have a Patreon where I have uploaded well over 400 videos. On the Patreon, I'm able to talk about subjects that I can't talk about on YouTube, controversial subject matter, political topics, uh, you name it, social issues. It's only $2 per month, but I think it's worth it. And as I've always said, I take requests. So thank you all for supporting me on my platform. And so shout out to LB, all right, because LB was talking about this on his channel. I was going to hop in, but I just decided I just want to do a video. So shout out to LB. So this is a video response to his live stream. And it's in regards to Steph Curry. Um, and it's regarding the three-point shot. Is Steph Curry, in your opinion, revolutionary in changing the perception of three-point shot and making it even more of a weapon? Or has he been more of a beneficiary of an ongoing process that that benefited him in the long run? And I think it's deeper than a yes or no answer, in my opinion. And you have to look at what was going on before he arrived in the NBA and during his career and what proceeded to happen. Now, of course, the three-point shot first was implemented in the ABA, or the American Basketball Association, which was a rival of the NBA from 1967, I believe, until 1976. So initially, of course, from 1947 or 49, if you want to consider when the NBA officially started, but from 1947 to 49 to 1979, there was no three-point shot in the NBA. So it was irrelevant. Uh, it was non-existent, so therefore the strategy, for the most part, was to score closer to the basket and getting in the paint or the mid-range because there was no three-point line. All right? Now, for the most part, there was no three-point line for most players preceding 1979, 1980. I think there were some colleges that had the three-point shot, but for the most part, you didn't see the three-point shot in college until 1985-ish, I think. So there was a lot of players where that shot was not in existence. And I think a lot of people who watch basketball today have to kind of stop thinking in today's context when you're judging players from the past. You say, well, oh, this guy only made 27 threes. But there was really, three-point shot in 14 of his 15 seasons. And then last year he played, he was a role player. So how in the world is he going to shoot a lot of threes in the era where that shot really wasn't even firmly established yet? So 1979, 1980 is the first year the three-point shot was implemented, which is one of the things they stole from the ABA, along with the slam dunk and slam dunk contest. All right. So initially, after the first season, where you did kind of have a little bit of a surge of curiosity with the shot, you had some guys shoot it at a decent clip the first year, 1979, 1980. The novelty of it wore off after 1 year. And for the most part, I'd say from 1980 until about 84 or so, you really didn't see that shot used frequently. In fact, on a per game basis, most teams only shot about 2 3-point attempts a game. Two. So that gives you a glimpse of how insignificant that shot was during the first half of the 1980s. Now you did have some guys that were considered 3-point specialists, early pioneers of the 3-point shot. He was a star in the 1970s. His career was winding down. Freddie Brown, who led the NBA in 3-point percentage in 1979-80 at 44%, which was phenomenal in those days, he shot the 3-pointer at a pretty good clip, 37% for his career. Some early pioneers, another guy would be Brian Taylor, who I believe he played in the ABA, but he wound up playing a couple years in the NBA, I believe, and was a 3-point specialist. I'm using air quotes saying that, and I'll tell you why in a moment. Until his career ended with with an Achilles rupture, back when that injury was almost the death of your career. And another guy was Joey Hassett. Joey Hassett was another, I'm using air quotes, 3-point specialist. The reason why I'm using air quotes is uh, they still didn't shoot it a lot, man. Um, Even the guys who were 3-point specialists, these role players, on average, they took about 1 to 2, maybe 2.5 threes a game on average. Um, a breakout game would be maybe them shooting 5 or 6 in a game, making 2 or 3. It still was not a widely used shot, only used in strategic situations where you needed to tie the game maybe toward the end of games. It just wasn't used often. Oftentimes, too, I want to say this. Another reason why the 3-point percentage was so much lower back then, on average 26%, 28% league wide, as opposed to 37% now. A lot of it was because these guys weren't skilled at shooting it, but a little bit of it was the situations when they were shooting it. Oftentimes, if you look at some games in the 80s, they were throwing up at the buzzer. They had the ball, they were being double teamed, and they had to just throw it up. You saw that a lot with some of the premier scorers because their games were still more predicated on the mid range or getting into the or taking it to the basket. I'm talking about perimeter players. Um, so the first guy to really popularize that shot, to me, even though Dr. Dunkenstein, um, Daryl Griffith took it too. He took a lot of them for that era. But the guy that really popularized the shot and made it into a weapon was Larry Bird, who actually didn't like that shot, by the way. He didn't really particularly care for the 3-point shot. He took a reasonable amount of attempts his first year, his rookie year, which is the first year the 3-point line was implemented. The next 3 or 4 years, he didn't really take a lot of them. But by 84, 85, he started using it as a weapon. You know, oftentimes he, along with Danny Ainge, who was another guy that was starting to use that shot more. In fact, I think Ainge was the first player in NBA history to make over 100 3-pointers in a season. I think in the 87-88 season, his last year in Boston, I believe he made 148 three-pointers, which by that time was by far the record. So Boston often used the three-point shot as a weapon when they went on a run. They would often pull up Bird, Ainge would often pull up for three when they were on a run and push the lead from 9 to say 15. And then all the other teams would call timeout. But they still didn't take it a lot. Maybe 3 or 4 attempts per game, but it was edging up a little bit. It was edging up a little bit, all right? Then the next guy that comes to mind, the next couple of guys would be Michael Adams. Michael Adams was a 5'10" point guard, played primarily in his best years with the Denver Nuggets and the Washington Bullets, and he was more of he was a volume shooter. He had a lot of bad shooting nights, but he had nights where it went in. Um, he was undersized, only 5'10", 162 pounds, but he had nights where he made a lot of them. He broke Danny Ainge's record, I think, the next year, making 166 three-point attempts. But then afterwards, you had other guys, Dale Ellis and Craig Hodges, Kyle Macy a little bit earlier on, Vernon Maxwell. You started seeing these guys who began to weaponize that shot more and more. And by the early 1990s, the three-point shot still was not used uniformly throughout the league, but you did have teams that would shoot more of them than others. One team that comes to mind, I think, that shot them more, for instance, would be the Seattle Supersonics. They had Dale Ellis and who else did they have? Ricky Pierce. They had Dana Barrows, a young Dana Barrows. They shot them more than others. The Houston Rockets shot them more than others. The Denver Nuggets, these high octane, fast paced teams that were guard orientated, they often shot the three-pointer more often. And then I would say after Michael Jordan's retirement in 1993, that's when you started seeing more guys who were coming into the NBA that were scorers, but now they had grown up with the three-point shot in college, watching the pros. Uh, these guys were coming in and they were actually scorers that had a three-point game. The Glenn Big Dog Robinsons, the Glenn Rices, and guys like that, the Jimmy Jacksons, they could shoot it. Reggie Miller was the guy that really popularized that shot. Dale Ellis had become the first guy in 1994 to make 1,000 three-pointers. But Reggie Miller was the guy that really, I think, to me, I think he's the guy that made the three-point shot into a, how can I say this? A valuable weapon to obliterate your opponent. No longer was it just a strategic shot. No longer was it a shot to just, pile on a lead or what have you. Now or a shot that was strategic when it was open or whatever. Now was a shot where Reggie was pulling up from 27. Reggie, when he was hot, would heat check and shoot from 30 feet. Reggie was a guy that really made it the staple of his game. And you had other guys that could shoot the three. Chris Mullin and uh, Drazen Petrovic. You had all these guys, the other specialists, of course, Steve Kerr and Tim Legler and so many others in the league. Dennis Scott, George McLeod. You started seeing a whole bunch of more of these guys. And, throughout the 1990s, I would say the league average sort of plateaued at around 14 a game. So it was definitely a weapon, not nearly used at the level it is today, but it was definitely a weapon. And then I would say from the late 90s up until 2010, it sort of leveled off, or it kind of stayed flatline. I'm going to say leveled off. It was sort of flatline between 14 and 18 attempts per game throughout the NBA. To me, it was more balanced. You still had post play. You still had the mid-range shot, even though throughout the 2000s, it was starting to fade. It was starting to fade a little bit then, the mid-range game. But you still had guys. You still had guys that used it. Richard Hamilton, Jordan came back with the Wizards, of course. Kobe Bryant, uh, uh, Sean Livingston. Uh, you had guys who still utilized the mid-range shot. But then in 2010, and thank you for being patient listening to me, that's when you saw an uptick. And it did coincide with the arrival of Steph Curry. I don't think personally that Steph Curry is solely responsible for it because I think what happened is in the 2000s, you saw teams like the Phoenix Suns with Kevin Nash, Steve Nash, excuse me, thinking about NWO, Steve Nash, and then you had the 2009 Orlando Magic that had all those good 3-point shooters, who people have forgotten about now, Rashard Lewis and Michael Petrix and uh, Hito Turkoglu and others. And then the science aspect of the game, the strategic, you had these guys who studied basketball and looked at the numbers and crunched the numbers. These guys are being hired now all of a sudden, replacing all these older guys who, were students of the game from another aspect, playing it and all that. I'm not judging it, but it just became more about the numbers. Analytics, that dreaded word. It came upon the arrival of Steph Curry, and that's when you started seeing not just Steph, but remember these other guys. Remember, uh, who was it? You start seeing more of these other players having these games. Ben Gordon making 9 in a game, or what was it? Chandler Parsons, I think, making 10 in the game, or the other guy, I can't think of his damn name, played with Denver, Ty something, uh, making 10 in a game. And you start seeing, a lot more guys shooting it more. The league average went up, you know, 20 a game, 22 a game. When the Miami Heat were doing their thing, when they weren't a 3-point shooting team per se, and they more or less went to the basket, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, their strategy was more to score in a high uh, efficiency, going to the paint. But even then, the league average for threes was going up 22, 23 a game. To me, the Warriors perfected it. They weren't just shooting threes, the Warriors. They were also a great overall defensive team that drafted very well, and they also could score in the paint. Uh, to me, especially before Kevin Durant arrived. So they were a very well balanced team. What happened is, to be Steph Curry, we've had guys who could pull up from deep before that, downtown Freddie Brown, Chuck Person, and others. But we had never seen a guy like Steph Curry that could shoot from the outside with his handles, with his, with that type of, ball handling ability from deep. It could shoot from different angles and, pull up, create his own shot to an extent. Catch and shoot, yes. But he could shoot the three in so many different varieties. And was shooting it at a clip that we hadn't seen before. Now, of course, there's one guy I forgot to mention. I need to be smacked for that. Ray Allen. Ray Allen also took the mantle from Reggie Miller and pushed the 3-point shot to another level. Reggie, of course, was the first guy to make 2,000 threes in a career. And Ray, of course, finished with almost 3,000 3-point attempts. And he was the guy. Got to remember that Ray was the guy who's considered the greatest 3-point shooter ever and the greatest shooter ever. And before him, it was Reggie. So this process has been going on for quite some time. All right. It's just that Steph has put it toward another level. Steph was the first guy to make 273s in the game, 283s in the game, 300 3-pointers in the game. And then, of course, in the 2015-2016 season, not only did he make 300, he finished with a whopping 402 made three-pointers. To me, he is the greatest three-point shooter we have ever seen, bar none. A lot of people say he's the greatest shooter. He has a tremendous overall case for that. I think there's still other people you could bring up, but as far as shooting the basketball from the perimeter, he's the greatest. Now, of course, you have some other volume scorers, James Harden, but they're not nearly as efficient as Steph Curry or Clay, for that matter. Clay is very efficient as well. He's one of the top 10 three-point shooters, in my opinion, as well. To shoot 43 plus percent for the three-point line for your career with the volume that he shoots it is remarkable. Yes, you have guys like Joe Harris. You have guys like Hubert Davis. You have guys like um, who else? Steve Kerr, of course, Tim Legler, even his brother. They're great catch and shoot players, but what Curry does is just phenomenal. So to answer to answer the question from my perspective, I think that Curry did somewhat benefit from an ongoing process, but he still took it and advanced it to another level to the point where every team was trying to emulate the Warriors. Players today, we see it now, fans, they judge players by how good they shoot the three. This is mainly because, in my opinion, of guys like Steph Curry and lesser extent to others, maybe Harden and Durant, but a lot of it, much of it is the guy here, Steph Curry. Steph Curry to me is the guy that popularized this shot, and he will go down as one of the greatest influencers in the history of the NBA. But that's my opinion. Tell me what you guys think.